Hi everyone. In this episode, we spoke to Emma Slade. Emma has had an absolutely amazing life story, in which after she was taken hostage at gunpoint during her high-flying banking career, she embarked upon a journey that took her to being an ordained nun in Bhutan. Emma has also set up the brilliant Opening Your Heart to Bhutan charity, and we talk about all of this in the episode. As ever, if you enjoy the episode, please give us a rating and a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. Hi Emma, how are you?
Oh yeah, fine.
So to start, we always ask what your relationship to mental health looks like.
My own mental health.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's pretty good, to be honest. I think I feel pretty lucky to have got to a place in my life where I can say that very genuinely.
Have you always found that that's the case, or have you had ups and downs with it?
No, I think, as you live a human life over the years, you're likely to encounter times when your mind is more of a confusing place or somewhere which is hard to live with. And I suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder after being held at gunpoint. And I think that really was a very profound experience for me and showed me how crucial the state of your mind is in terms of how it feels to be you and how it affects the quality of your life, the whole quality of your experience. So that was definitely a time of difficulty with my own mind, but I've obviously done lots of training and practices since then, which have enabled me to get a very happy relationship with my own mind.
Would you kind of say that really not very nice experience was a bit of a catalyst for changes in your life in general, or do you think the way your life has gone subsequently would have eventually happened anyway?
Oh no, it was definitely a massive catalyst. Yeah, without any doubt. Obviously, I wouldn't have wished it to have happened. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I now feel, very grateful in a way that it happened, which sounds a very strange thing to say. But I do think it forced me to really ask some questions about what kind of life I wanted to lead, and what kind of person I wanted to be. And it did change my attitudes to a lot of things in the end. I did have to I did have to recover from the post-traumatic stress disorder, which is no small thing. I had to do that first. In terms of whether I would always have ultimately entered a path of service, of spiritual inquiry, I think it was there, but I think the attractions of the material world and my intellectual drive may have kept me on a more obvious career path for longer if this incident hadn't happened.
I think maybe a bit of background on what kind of career you were in when this happened, and what your life kind of looked like before that incident happened might be beneficial.
Okay, sure, yeah. So I was a senior financial analyst for a big global bank working in Hong Kong, and I very much enjoyed my job. It was very intellectually stimulating. It felt quite important because we're dealing with large sums of money. In the financial markets, there's a great sense of that you're sort of at the edge of what's being created. It's full of change, constant change, and it's quite an exciting place to be. So intellectually, I felt very, very fulfilled in that role. And so I don't I don't kind of judge people who have that sort of career. I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing. It was just something that fulfilled a part of me, but only a small part of me. And in the years since then, obviously, I've explored what I feel are more essential and deeper aspects of who I am as a human being. I'm very grateful for the experience that I had, but I'm also grateful that it didn't occupy the whole of my human life.
So do you think did you realise that you had that different part of you that you described as a human being when you were working in that, or was it only kind of subsequently that you discovered that there was even that part of you that existed?
I think early on as a child and as a teenager, I was quite drawn to spiritual things, like any pictures of a Buddha or statues of a Buddha. I was always very interested in Asia. I mean, ended up in Hong Kong, even with my job. So I think when I was younger, I had a clearer idea of it. But I think various life events happen, like you get very involved with passing exams and going to university and then trying to make your way in the world. And I very much put those underlying interests to the back of my mind, I think.
So yeah, do you think that's something that just thinking about that, do you think that's something that we get slightly wrong in well, I can only speak for British society, that we put so much focus on exams, going to university, getting a job, that we lose that ability to explore different parts of who we are, and that actually we might lose the ability to find something that we are really good at that's not necessarily a conventional route.
I'm always wary when we start to talk about forms of living as wrong, because I learned a lot from doing exams, from being university and having a proper job in the world. Every experience we have, we can learn a lot from. Many good things can come out of it. And so I don't think those stages or those experiences were wrong. I'm just pleased that I didn't get completely stuck in them for too long. I think when I look back at my life, there's been different phases, whether it's exams, university, career, maybe looking at relationships. And I just think they all have merit. They all have wisdom in them. They all have a chance to grow in them. But it's just to keep on growing and not feel that you're somehow trapped or stuck in a particular mode of operation that you're in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So how did you begin? There was obviously one particularly traumatic incident, but something that really, reading the book, really struck me from that was that actually the feeling of really deep compassion that you had for the perpetrator of that incident. And do you think, was that feeling very much the start of a turning point and a start to move to more of what you do now and who you are now?
Yeah, actually, later on, when I look back at the book, I thought I should have said a bit more about that, actually, at the time. I was incredibly taken aback by the fact that after the incident had happened, there was this, what felt like very spontaneous feeling of profound compassion for all of the circumstances, myself, him, the people around, the police, in fact, all of the beings that had been involved, as if you could just see the whole interlinked web of people and feel sort of compassion for them. I have to say that it didn't feel like something I had caused. I really didn't feel like I was being compassionate. I just felt as if this force of compassion arose. Really didn't feel like something that I had caused. So it took me back. It really surprised me because I didn't feel like I'd caused it. And I really, whilst thinking I was a vaguely okay human being, I really hadn't thought that I was particularly interested in what compassion might be, kindness might be. It wasn't a quality that I valued very highly. I valued being clever and knowing stuff, being quite sort of enthusiastic and energetic. So suddenly to feel this powerful force of compassion seemingly out of nowhere, feeling so relevant to me. That was a real surprise to me, I have to say.
And did that kind of lead you to start thinking about starting the journey that you went on to become where you are now, I suppose, through kind of, I think it was through yoga at the start, and then eventually starting to visit Bhutan and going back there more, and then, you know, founding the charity and all of that?
I think it was, it definitely shifted my awareness of what was possible. It planted a seed, but I think it took time for it to come to fruition. So many other conditions were necessary, like meeting my teacher, like doing a lot of practice. And then eventually it came, I think, into fruition with the decision to found a charity and to dedicate a lot of my time to helping children in Bhutan. You know, there was no way, that moment in Jakarta after the incident had happened, and I felt that compassion, I didn't think it would lead to anything. It was just, for a moment, how my mind or my heart felt. But you know, I didn't imagine it was going to go anywhere. And it did take a lot of other things to come to the point where I actually wanted to, you know, feel I wanted to totally put that into action. So it took some time, but certainly that was the seed.
Yeah. So, and then on your first visit to Bhutan, you met, forgive me, I've completely forgotten Lama, the monk's name.
Yeah, Lama. Yeah, Nimasering, his name.
And
yeah,
that kind of started a really, well, I suppose, beautiful relationship that changed your life further, I suppose. And so what, I suppose, how did that come about in the first place? How did that relationship with him evolve and move, and how do you kind of split your time between the UK and Bhutan?
So yeah, it's a very beautiful relationship. It's also a hilarious relationship, because you have to imagine, here you have a fairly energetic, outspoken Western woman, and there you have a fairly straight-talking Lama, so in robes, living nearly 3,000 meters altitude in the Himalayas, has never been to the West, has probably not had much experience of women, even, to be frank. You know, many male monastics who've been monastics for a lot of their life also aren't very well versed on the other gender, you know. So I think it was beautiful, but it was also kind of hilarious at points, a bit like two worlds looking at each other and putting their head on one side and going, you know, what's that? So I think we have to recognize that was part of it too. Obviously, meeting him in October 2011 at Dochala in the Himalayas, yeah, who knows why that happened. I can't say kind of why it happened. I stumbled across him, and it was just very clear that there just this strong feeling that I could listen to him forever, and somehow there was some very strong kind of rope between us. And you know, not long after, a few weeks after, I returned to Bhutan to seek to find him, and luckily that was possible. And that's on the 1st of January, very early in the morning, on the 1st of January 2012. He taught me the compassion text, which was my kind of specialist text, I suppose. And then he formally took me on as his student, and that was, I felt really, really extraordinary. And yeah, it's really a life-changing thing. And I think for anybody who deeply inquires into what it is to be human, you know the value of a teacher, you know the value of somebody that you trust, that recognizes the best in you and encourages you to really flourish as a human. And that's really what Lama did for me, and I'll be forever grateful.
Yeah, and it eventually led to you becoming ordained. Can you kind of talk us through a little bit about what that process looked like and how hard it is?
Yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah. So I didn't realize at the time, honestly, I'm so naive, but I really didn't realize at the time that no Western woman had been ordained in Bhutan. So I really didn't realize the gravity of what was going on. Um, but I was given that opportunity. So in this huge monastic thing called a Zong in Punakha, the ancient capital of Bhutan, I was given the opportunity to be formally ordained, which means to live under vows. So there was a long ceremony, all in Tibetan, and it's very magical and incredible, really. And so I'd already been living under vows for 2 years before that happened. They tend to wait a while before formally ordaining anybody, just to make sure that it's the right thing for them. And yeah, so obviously that was a huge turning point in my life, if you can imagine, having been born in England and grown up in the West, etc., 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 and to be in the ancient capital of Bhutan, being ordained as a Buddhist nun in a very sort of sacred ceremony. It was quite, yeah, it's a day I'll never forget, as you can imagine. And since then, obviously, I've spent a lot of time in Bhutan. I founded the charity, I've written the book, and I've done a lot of practice under the guidance of Lama. And now my teacher is actually the person who ordained me in Bhutan. So after about 4 or 5 years of intensive practice with Lama, he recommended that this other person become my teacher, and he is now my meditation teacher, the person who actually ordained me. And it's a incredible opportunity, because to have a clear path, a good teacher and a reliable teacher, and a clear path of instruction is just so important. And you can't really find it in books. There's nothing like being taught one-to-one by a great meditation master. I mean, I can't explain to you just how wonderful that is as an opportunity, and I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, I want to talk about Bhutan in general and the charity in a sec, but
Right.
one thing I really wanted to ask was how whether it's unusual for women who have children to be ordained, but also
yeah, I think this was why I was really surprised. I mean, it wasn't my idea. None of this was my idea. This is Lama telling me what to do, and I had never thought that I would be ordained, because I'd already had a child. I hadn't been married, but I had a child. But actually it's considered quite possible, but not very usual. But because he told me that this was what I should do with my life, then obviously I did it. And so, yeah, it has meant that I bring a lot to my teachings as a nun and to my practice, because I bring the reality of having been in the working world, and I bring the reality of what it is to have a child, and the responsibility and the feelings that come with that. And so I hope I bring a lot to the apparently, esoteric practices of meditation and retreat and lamas and Bhutan, etc. It can sound really like another world, but I think many of my other experiences really make me want the teachings and the practices to be practical and helpful for people who are not living that kind of esoteric life.
And your son seems to really, I don't know if thrive is the right word, but when I was reading the book, he seems to describe you as the happiest mum in the by the school gates and things. But how hard was it to do the training when you're back in the UK, but also when you are like the primary care for somebody else?
Yeah, I think my son, he's 14 today. This is actually his birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. So he's 14 today. He's now 5'11", and he has gone from being very proud of his mum to being quite embarrassed about his mum, and then back into a sort of middle zone, So I think if you really inquire with him, he's still very proud of what I've done. And but he probably, you'd have to dig quite deep to get that out of him. But ultimately, I think he knows that there's a lot of greed in the world, and he knows that I'm trying not to live a life of greed. And with the charity, I think he understands a lot of that. So hopefully it's been a good role model, for him. And yeah, it has been hard at points, but I've had to be very determined, very, very determined. In the practices that I did in the beginning, it was a little bit easier because I was doing many hours of practice every day. So when he went to school, I'd practice a lot, etc. And it's become a little bit more multifaceted since the book came out and the charity, and then teaching more and people wanting to talk, etc. So my life is quite multifaceted now. Back in the days when I was doing intensive practice for those sort of 4 years, it was a little bit easier. I just had to bring him up and then do a lot of practice. Now I really have to have a very strong and resilient mind, because there's actually a lot more going on than just that. If you want to be a practitioner, a committed practitioner, you are going to have to be determined, because there will be a million things that will appear to be more interesting than doing practice, like, even like, ironing, or I don't know, chatting to somebody, or there will be a million things that can distract you from having a regular practice. So I think we all find that. Me too. This is where having a teacher that you feel a profound connection with is so helpful, because it keeps you on the path.
If we can, let's talk about Bhutan now and the charity, and why is it, first of all, I suppose, what drew you to it, and why is it such a special place for you?
I'd always wanted to visit Bhutan, actually. Even from a young child, I'd spoken of it, if you ask my mum. So if you remember from the book, at one point, my mum says, "Oh, please just go to this country. I'm so sick of hearing about it. Just go there," So there was that. But I think that ultimately it was the place I found my teacher. That was the thing. I love Bhutan dearly. Being there is incredibly magical and special for me. But ultimately it was the place I found my teacher. And that is why it remains so sacred for me.
What was it that led you to move from kind of merely being, well, I suppose not merely, but, visiting it for yourself, I suppose, to visiting it to help others and form the charity?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I was, again, I don't know, kindness and compassion, they just seem to surprise me, So I'm as surprised as anyone that I ended up setting up this charity and, really putting such a lot of time into doing it. I'm pretty much surprised I did that. But I think it's the power of practice. I think in the end, if you make a lot of prayers and meditations about compassion, in the end, you just end up doing it. You just do. You feel you have to. You just feel you've changed, and you genuinely want to act kindly in the world. You realize that you are just one person, and you have to expand beyond thinking of just one person or two people or three people. And you genuinely wish, when you connect with others, to be of help to them, to in some way bring something joyful into their life, whether it be a medical thing or a chance to go to school, or if it's just a smile and paying some attention and listening to them, or whatever. Your mind, your way you approach a situation, I just realized had just changed, and I guess, for all my interest in meditation and Buddhist philosophy, I still didn't realize that might happen. And then it sort of ended up happening. And and I just, it's a joy, it's a joy to be able to help children there. And yeah, I find it very moving, and I find it it gives me a profound feeling of peace and integrity, that I'm not just talking about helping others, but I really am trying to help others. I just am, and it makes me feel peaceful.
Great. And what exactly is it that the charity? I know it's a lot to do with school and healthcare, because Bhutan has some fairly remote areas and some quite poor areas. So what's the work that the charity actually does?
Yeah, so Opening Your Heart to Bhutan, that's the name of the charity. It mainly helps children either with special needs or living in challenging rural circumstances. And its 3 areas of interest are helping them access education, access medical care, and ensuring that their shelter is adequate. And we've played a large role in building the first purpose-built school for special needs children in Bhutan. That's in the east, near Tashigang. We've also done things like helped train a specialist in prosthetic limbs, and we've provided prosthetic limbs for some children and young people in Bhutan. We've organised a lot of educational projects with children with special needs and those without, working together to meet each other, and particularly we've done art camps around that. We've built 2 playgrounds, we've built 1 sports ground, we've done a host of things, and at the moment we're putting clean water filter systems in 4 schools in Bhutan. I'd like to do some more of that. And so we do a whole range of stuff. If you look on the website under completed projects, you'll see the range of stuff that we've done. But just to clarify, in the beginning, all I did was collect sleeping bags, and I put a roof on a building in southern Bhutan, and that really was all I was thinking about doing. I never thought it would come to this level we're operating on now, with the help of so many people. My goodness, thank goodness for kind people who want to give their time or help us. So yeah, it's been amazing, I have to say.
And I like the bit where you said you never thought you'd once you'd been ordained and things, you never thought you'd go back to a world where you were a kind of CEO.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I was going to go into sort of this peaceful place, floating a foot off the ground, and then I just felt I just couldn't. Yeah.
What one story I really liked was, I think it was a girl that did she have cerebral palsy?
Nakum.
And she thought
Nakum in
yes. Could you tell us about her and maybe give us an update if you still have much contact with her and how she's getting on?
Yeah, she was really the girl who I think inspired me to really push ahead with the charity. She we managed to get her to Thimphu, to the capital, to the hospital, to get a proper diagnosis of cerebral palsy. We got her some physiotherapy and she began to walk, which was really like a miraculous thing to see, to be honest. And then she joined the Eastern school that we'd been building, and she really, really thrived there. It was amazing to see. She learned sign language, because in the school you need to learn sign language to communicate with all the pupils. She learnt greater English, and she learned tailoring, and she made me the most beautiful bag, which she presented to me, and it was just fantastic. So she stayed in the school for, I think, 2 or 3 years, and she's back home now, and she's fine, and she still contacts me, and so I'm very, very happy to have met her. Even when I think about her, I feel very grateful to her. She inspired me to do more than I maybe had thought I could do or that I wanted to do. You know, she expanded my sense of what was possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I suppose zooming out a bit, could you talk about Bhutan a bit more generally, and what it's like as a place, and how they do things slightly differently? I've kind of read about the way they don't use GDP. I can't remember the term they use, but it's more to do with...
So Bhutan is it's the last remaining independent Himalayan kingdom. It's a democracy, but it still has a very inspiring thing. It's the last remaining Vajrayana Buddhist country which has remained untouched by invasion or whatever. It has a population of about 700,000, and it's about the size of Switzerland. So you can see from that, the population density is very low. And the government has a law that I think it's 60% or 65% of the country has to remain indigenous forest. So you get a feeling already maybe that you feel as if humans are still very much of a small part of the landscape. And a big contrast to the southeast of England, where it's incredibly developed and we're all quite close together, you know. So there's something I found very liberating about being in the mountains, the clean air, the amount of nature, the birds, and just that sense of the balance between human life and natural world is very different. And I find that very amazing. It is a very spiritual place. You know, you can't really distinguish Buddhism from the Bhutanese culture. They say they're very interlinked, and they are, and that just gives a very special feeling to everything, because the dimension of devotion, of compassion, of meditation, these aspects, they're not like strange things that are somehow just done by a couple of people or whatever. They're very much part of the culture. So you'll see temples everywhere. You'll see people doing mantras and prayers everywhere. And it's just that side of life, or that side of a human being, is really alive there. And that's something I find very inspiring. In terms of what you said about having not so much emphasis on the gross domestic product, they have this policy of gross national happiness, GNH, which was inspired by the previous king, the fourth king of Bhutan. And it has a vision of sort of holistic development, economic, but also cultural and religious. And so it's sort of a way of thinking about how a country develops in a very holistic way. And so I think that's very inspiring for anybody to read about.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, and especially my my PhD is in climate change, and the thing you said about the law to keep 60% of forestry seems quite a progressive law. I think I might be completely wrong, but I think I've read that it actually helps to keep them essentially carbon neutral because of all the emissions the forest takes in.
Yeah, that may well be the case. I'm not an expert on that. On the climate change front, Bhutan is concerned about the climate change occurring on the Tibetan plateau and the melting of raising temperatures there, which may cause greater water flow down into the Bhutanese lakes and rivers, which can burst their banks and lead to flooding. So I know in the northern part of Bhutan, there's been some research into the northern part of Bhutan where there are a number of lakes which could be affected by climate change. So it is something you hear about in Bhutan.
Yeah, and the way we kind of like to wrap things up is by asking what you do to kind of safeguard your own mental health. And
I think I mean, there will be formal practice for sure, but there'll also be very simple things. I think that, especially I'm quite busy now with lots of different things going on, right? I just know from my own experience that I need to take time to do peaceful and simple things if I'm going to kind of be happy and be at my best. And that may be meditation practice, but it may also be walking around a garden and snipping a few, sort of plants back or something like that. I also, as you know from the book, I'm a big fan of being absorbed in a jigsaw puzzle. I like being with animals and stroking cats and dogs and being friendly to them. So yeah, I have formal meditation practice, but I also have a lot of very simple just simple little things that I do which help me feel calm and in a kind space. And they're not, they don't require me to be speaking Tibetan and doing all kinds of crazy things. But without them, my life can feel a bit, not just a bit jam-packed. I need these kind of moments of quiet, kind pauses in the day. And then I can do a lot, actually. But if it all gets jammed up together, then I don't enjoy my life so much, I'll be honest.
Yeah. And the last thing we ask is, how can we find out more about what you do and opening your heart to Bhutan?
Well, the charity has a website which is largely done by volunteers. So it's usually fairly up to date, but let's hope. So the charity has a website, Open Your Heart to Bhutan. Obviously, you can read the book, Set Free, and that's on Audible, and it's in a few different languages as well, which is wonderful. And you can contact me on Facebook under Emma Slade, and you can join some teachings if you wish to. And I try to I do answer every email sent to me personally. I don't have a secretary that does it, so if you email me, I will answer you myself.
Brilliant, Emma, that's been fascinating, and say happy birthday to Oscar.
Thank you, yeah, thank you very much.
Hi everyone, just a quick note to say that although the things I talked about with Emma we may find helpful, we're not trained health professionals. If you're struggling with your mental health, please contact your GP or NHS service or a charity like Mind on 0300 123 3393.